My family refused to help me when I was drowning in debt. Then they begged me for $30,000 for my sister's wedding. But my cold response left them stunned. 2 years ago, I hit rock bottom. My first business venture, the one into which I had poured my heart, soul, and every dollar I could scrape together, failed spectacularly. It wasn't just a failure, it was a disaster. I was drowning in debt, forced to borrow from friends just to keep the lights on and the food in the fridge. It wasn't a situation I ever imagined for myself. I'd always been the guy everyone depended on, the one who made things happen, the so-called golden child. When I finally swallowed my pride and turned to my family for help, I was met with something I'll never forget. I sat in the living room with my parents and tried to explain how bad things were. It wasn't easy for me to admit that I needed them. I'd spent years being their problem solver, helping with everything from Ashley's endless college problems to my mom's tech questions to my dad's side projects. Now I needed them. But instead of the understanding and support I thought I'd earned, I got this. You're on your own, Tom. And to be honest, we don't have time for this right now, my mother said. You know, we're paying for Ashley's education right now, so bye. That hit me like a brick wall. It wasn't just the words, it was the way they said it, like I was an afterthought. Ashley was their priority, as always. She was in grad school at the time, racking up expenses I didn't even want to think about. But I helped them every time they needed it for years, and now that I was the one in need, they couldn't even pretend to care. I left their house that day feeling a mixture of anger and humiliation that I didn't know how to process. I decided then and there that I was done being their golden fairy. Done being the guy who sacrificed for everyone else while they took me for granted. It wasn't easy, but I cut off contact with them almost completely. I only showed up for my birthday because my mom insisted, and even that felt forced. The rest of the time, I focused on climbing out of the hole I was in. I took small gigs, worked absurd hours, and slowly rebuilt my business from the ground up. Every dollar I made went toward paying off my debt. It took grit, sleepless nights, and sheer determination, but by some miracle I made it work. Fast forward 2 years and I was in a completely different place. My business was pulling in $1,000 a month in net profits, and for the first time in years I felt stable. More than stable. I felt like I'd won. I had pulled myself out of the mess on my own just like they said I had to. But I never forgot what they'd said to me that day or how little they cared. So when my parents and Ashley showed up at my door unannounced, I was already skeptical. They hadn't been to my house in years, and here they were, all 3 of them. I had no idea what they wanted, but I had a sinking feeling that it wasn't going to be good. I wasn't wrong. When I opened the door, my mom, dad, and Ashley were standing there, dressed like they were going to a business meeting. I leaned against the doorframe, not bothering to hide my surprise. Usually, only my parents showed up when they wanted something, but Ashley, this was new. "Hey, Tom," my mom chirped, her smile overly bright. My dad gave me a nod, while Ashley just stood there awkwardly, clutching her designer purse like it was a lifeline. "What's going on?" I asked, stepping aside to let them in. They walked into my living room, looking around as if they hadn't just ignored my existence for the past 2 years. My mom sat on the couch, smoothing her skirt, while my dad stood with his hands in his pockets. Ashley hovered near the window, avoiding my gaze. I stayed by the door, waiting for them to get to the point. Finally, my father cleared his throat. "We're here to talk about something important," he said. I raised an eyebrow. "Important, huh? Let me guess. You need something." My mom's smile faltered for a second, but it quickly recovered. "Well, it's Ashley. She's getting married. That caught me off guard." "Married? Since when?" Ashley finally spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "Fred and I have been talking about it for a while. He's the one." I didn't know much about Fred except that he was some guy she'd met at school. He wasn't exactly the type to make a strong impression. Quiet, unassuming, and if I was honest, a little bland. "Okay," I said slowly. "Congratulations, I guess. What does that have to do with me?" That's when my mom dropped the bombshell. "We were hoping you could help pay for the wedding, you know, contribute a little." I couldn't help myself, I laughed out loud. "You're kidding, right?" My dad frowned. "Tom, this is serious. Weddings aren't cheap, and we've already spent so much on Ashley's education and her car. We just don't have the money right now." "And you think I do?" I shot back. "After everything? You know what? I'll bite. How much are we talking?" Ashley finally turned to me, her eyes wide and pleading. "About 30 grand, she said. I stared at her, trying to process what I just heard. 30 grand? Are you out of your mind? It's not just for the wedding, she added quickly. It's for the honeymoon, too. Fred and I want to go to Europe. I couldn't believe the audacity. 2 years ago, they'd left me to fend for myself when I was drowning in debt, and now they were asking me to finance Ashley's dream wedding and vacation. You've got to be kidding me, I said, shaking my head. I'm not your personal ATM. Ashley's face crumpled. Please, Tom. I love him so much. She hesitated, then blurted it out. I'm pregnant. That made me freeze. Wait, what? I'm pregnant, she repeated, tears streaming down her face. I just want to give our baby a good start, you know. Fred and I need that. This turned into something I hadn't expected. My parents looked at me expectantly, as if waiting for me to cave, but all I could feel was anger. Anger at their entitlement, anger at Ashley for her reckless decisions, and anger at myself for ever thinking they'd change. I'll think about it, I said flatly, needing to get them out of my house before I exploded. Ashley fell to her knees, sobbing. Please, Tom, I need you. I held up a hand. Enough. I'm busy right now. We'll talk later. They left shortly thereafter, but the encounter left me confused. I couldn't wrap my head around the sheer audacity of their request or the mess Ashley had gotten herself into. After they left, I sat on the couch and tried to process everything. That's when I made up my mind I had to talk to Fred. Something about it all felt wrong, and I wanted to hear his side of the story. The next day, I called Fred and asked if we could meet. He sounded hesitant, but agreed after I assured him it wouldn't take long. We decided to meet at a local coffee shop near his apartment. I wasn't sure what to expect, but I had a feeling there was more to this situation than Ashley was letting on. Fred showed up on time, looking as inconspicuous as ever in a simple hoodie and jeans. He seemed surprised that I wanted to talk to him, but he shook my hand and sat across from me without much fuss. So I began, getting right to the point. Ashley and my parents came to see me yesterday. They told me that you two are getting married. Fred's face immediately went pale. He looked down at his coffee cup and fidgeted nervously. Yeah, about that. I leaned back and waited for him to continue. She kind of dropped it on me, he admitted. She proposed last week, now it was my turn to look surprised. She proposed to you? He nodded. Yeah, don't get me wrong, I care about her, but marriage? I'm not ready for that. I told her that, but she said it didn't matter because, well, he hesitated, then blurted it out. She's pregnant. I crossed my arms. And you're sure about that? About the pregnancy, I mean. Fred looked at me as if I had just asked if the water was wet. She showed me the test. I didn't really have a choice but to believe her, right? I said, thinking back to Ashley's dramatic plea. And how do you feel about all this? The wedding, the baby, the whole situation? Fred let out a long sigh. Honestly, I feel trapped. I love Ashley, but this wasn't my plan. She's the one who pushed for the wedding. She even talked to her parents about it before I had a chance to think about it, and now they're acting like it's a done deal. The pieces began to fall into place. Ashley had always been impulsive, but this was a whole new level. I couldn't help feeling sorry for Fred. He seemed like a decent guy who got caught up in Ashley's whirlwind. Look, I said, leaning forward. They came to me yesterday and asked for $30,000 to pay for the wedding and honeymoon. $30,000. And now you're telling me you're not even sure you want to get married. Fred's eyes widened. They asked you for money? That's crazy. I don't even want a big wedding. I told Ashley I'd be fine with something small, but she insisted it had to be this huge thing. Typical, I muttered. Here's the deal, Fred. I'm not giving them a dime. If you're not on board with this wedding, you need to tell them. Don't let them guilt you into something you're not ready for. Fred looked conflicted, but nodded slowly. You're right. I have to be honest with her. Good, I said, standing up. Because if you don't, I will. We shook hands and I left the cafe feeling strangely satisfied. For the first time in years, I felt like I had the upper hand with my family. Fred had confirmed what I already suspected. This whole thing was a mess of Ashley's making. Now it was time to confront my family. A few days later, I drove over to my parents' house. They weren't expecting me, but I didn't care. I was done letting them dictate the story. It was time to set the record straight. When I walked into the house, my mother greeted me with her usual over-the-top enthusiasm. Tom, what a surprise, she said, leading me into the living room, where my father was watching television. Ashley was there too, sitting on the couch, cell phone in hand. The atmosphere was almost too perfect, like they were plotting their next move. I want to talk, I said, cutting to the chase. About the wedding. My mother gasped, her eyes brightening. Oh, Tom, I knew you'd come. Ashley's been so stressed, poor thing. I ignored her and turned to Ashley. "Where's Fred?" Ashley blinked, surprised by the question. "He's at work. Why?" "Because I was talking to him," I said, "and you're not going to like what he had to say." The room fell silent. My dad muted the TV and my mom's smile froze on her face. Ashley sat up straighter, clutching a throw pillow as if it would shield her from whatever was coming. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice shaking. I said, "Fred doesn't want to get married. In fact, he doesn't even want a big wedding. He told me that you're the one pushing for it, and he feels trapped. And let's not forget the little detail about how you got pregnant on purpose." Ashley's face turned crimson. "That's not true," she snapped. "He's lying." I shrugged. "Funny, because he seemed pretty sure. He even said he told you he wasn't ready for marriage, but you ignored him and went straight to Mom and Dad. Sound familiar?" My parents looked at Ashley, their expressions changing from confusion to concern. It was my mother who was the first to speak. "Ashley, is this true? Did you pressure Fred?" Ashley's eyes filled with tears. I love him so much. I thought if we got married, everything would be okay. And the baby..." She stopped herself, realizing she was only digging the hole deeper. My father rubbed his temples. "Ashley, you can't just force someone to get married. It doesn't work that way." "Exactly," I said, crossing my arms. "And that's why I'm not giving you a dime for this ridiculous wedding. You want to play games? Fine. But don't drag me into it." Ashley started to cry now. Full-blown sobs. "You don't understand. I need this. I need him." My mom rushed to comfort her, while my dad just sat there, shaking his head. I didn't feel sorry for Ashley, not this time. She made her bed, and now she had to lie in it. Before I could leave, Ashley's phone buzzed on the couch. She picked it up, and her face went pale. "It's Fred," she whispered. "Go ahead," I said. "Answer it." She hesitated, then swiped to answer the call. We all watched as she listened in silence, her expression crumbling by the second. When she hung up, she looked like she'd seen a ghost. "What did he say?" my mother asked, her voice shaking. Ashley's voice was barely audible. He said it's over. He's breaking up with me. He doesn't want any of this." My dad cursed under his breath, while my mom tried to comfort Ashley. But I just stood there, feeling a strange sense of vindication. I hadn't told Fred to break up with her, but I wasn't about to step in and fix things either. As I turned to leave, my dad called out, "Tom, wait. What about the baby?" I looked back at them. That's her responsibility now. She made her choices. I'm not bailing her out this time. And with that, I walked out the door, leaving them to deal with the aftermath. A week went by, and I didn't hear from anyone in my family. Not a single phone call or text. I thought maybe they'd finally gotten the message that I was no longer their safety net. But deep down, I knew better. Sure enough, my mom showed up at my office one afternoon, looking more frazzled than I'd ever seen her. She wasn't the type to drop by unannounced, so I knew it was serious. "Tom, I need to talk to you," she said, wringing her hands. I sighed and motioned for her to sit down. "What is it now?" "It's Ashley," she said, her voice heavy with worry. "She's not doing well. After Fred broke up with her, she's a mess. She's not eating, she's barely sleeping, and she won't stop crying. She needs help." I stared at her without saying anything. What did she expect me to do? Wave a magic wand and fix everything? "And the baby," she added, her voice breaking. "We're worried about her health. It's early in the pregnancy, but the stress isn't good for her or the baby." I leaned back in my chair, trying to decide how to respond. Part of me wanted to tell her that it wasn't my problem. After all they'd put me through, they didn't deserve my help. But another part of me couldn't ignore the fact that an innocent child was involved. "What exactly do you want?" I finally said. "She needs financial assistance," my mother admitted. "She can't afford to raise a baby on her own, and we're stretched too thin. We do what we can, but it's not enough." I almost laughed at the irony. 2 years ago, they told me to deal with my problems on my own. Now here they were, asking me to do the same for Ashley. "I'll think about it," I said, giving her the same line I'd given them before. "But don't expect me to swoop in and save the day." My mother looked like she wanted to argue, but she held her tongue. "Thank you," she said quietly. And then she left. In the days that followed, my mind became a whirlwind of conflicting emotions, replaying the chaos of that unexpected family intrusion over and over, like a stubborn loop in an old film reel. Sleep came in fits and starts, interrupted by the what-ifs that clawed at the edges of my resolve. I resented them deeply, my parents with their selective affections, Ashley with her whirlwind of poor decisions that always seemed to land at someone else's doorstep. Yet, try as I might to steel myself against it, I couldn't shake the image of a tiny, innocent life about to enter this tangled web of dysfunction. It wasn't fair. The baby, my future nephew or niece, had done nothing to deserve being thrust into a world where the adults around them had built walls of entitlement and neglect. No child should start their journey burdened by the fallout of grown-up recklessness. That thought gnawed at me, softening the sharp edges of my anger just enough to make action feel inevitable, if not entirely welcome. After a couple of restless nights, I picked up the phone and dialed my mom's number, my thumb hovering over the call button for what felt like an eternity. When she answered, her voice carried that familiar mix of weariness and hope, as if she could sense the olive branch before I even extended it. I laid it out plainly, my words measured but firm. I'd step in to help, but not without strings attached, strings that would force some real change. Ashley needed to confront the mirror of her own actions, to own up to the manipulations and the shortcuts she'd taken that had led her here. No more dodging accountability, no more weaving tales of victimhood to mask her choices. If I was going to open my wallet and commit to financial support, covering medical bills, baby gear, maybe even a bit toward rent to keep a roof over their heads, I demanded proof of her commitment in return. Effort wasn't optional, it was the price of entry. Show me steps forward, tangible ones, job applications, therapy sessions, prenatal checkups attended without a babysitter for her excuses. My mother paused on the other end of the line, the silence stretching like a held breath, before she murmured her agreement. There was relief in her tone, but also a hint of surprise, as if she'd braced for outright rejection. We didn't linger on the call. There was too much unsaid, too many old wounds still raw. But it was done, a tentative bridge rebuilt on my terms. A few days passed in a blur of work meetings and solitary evenings, until the moment arrived for the real test. I arranged to meet Ashley at a quiet corner cafe, the kind with worn wooden tables and the faint aroma of fresh scones that always seemed to coax confessions out of people. When she walked in, it was like seeing a ghost of the vibrant, demanding sister I'd known, the one who flitted through life collecting accolades and indulgences without a backward glance. Now, her shoulders slumped under the weight of exhaustion, her skin pallid against the dark circles framing her eyes, and her usual spark dimmed to a flicker of defeat. She slid into the booth across from me, her hands twisting a napkin into anxious knots, avoiding my gaze as if it might shatter her fragile composure. The air between us hung heavy, thick with the ghosts of our fractured history, but I pushed through, determined not to let sentiment derail the purpose. Leaning forward slightly, I met her eyes when she finally looked up, my voice steady despite the churn in my gut. Listen, Ashley, I'm going to help you through this. But let's be crystal clear, this isn't about you, or about erasing the mess you've made. It's for that baby, the one who doesn't get a vote in any of this drama. I'm talking about covering the essentials, doctor visits, a crib, maybe some formula if things get tight. But don't mistake this for a free pass or an endless lifeline. This is no blank check, no magic fix to wave away the consequences. You have to pull yourself up, starting now. That means dusting off your resume and landing a steady job, even if it's entry-level and unglamorous. Enroll in those parenting classes you've been talking about. Show up to every session, and actually absorb what they teach. Read the books, join a support group, build a routine that screams responsibility. Whatever it takes to prove you're not just surviving but stepping into this role as a mother with both feet. Because I'm drawing a hard line here, I'm not shouldering it all. This has to be a partnership, or it's nothing at all. The words hung there, unyielding, a gauntlet thrown down in the soft hum of the cafe's background chatter. She sat motionless for a long moment, her lower lip trembling as tears welled up and traced silent paths down her cheeks. Then, with a small, shaky nod, she whispered, I get it, Tom. Really, I do. Thank you. From the bottom of my heart, I swear I won't screw this up. I won't let you, or the baby, down. Her voice cracked on the last word, raw with a vulnerability I'd rarely glimpsed before. Was it genuine? A part of me, the scarred, one that remembered her pleas 2 years prior, whispered doubts, urging me to guard my heart against another round of empty promises. But another part, quieter and perhaps wiser, saw the flicker of resolve in her eyes, the first crack in the armor of denial. It wasn't trust, not yet, not the full, unguarded kind that families are supposed to share. But it was enough to call it a beginning, a fragile seed planted in unlikely soil. We parted with a brief, awkward hug, and as I watched her walk out into the afternoon light, I felt a strange mix of hope and wariness settle over me, like the calm before a storm you know might still rage, but at least you'd fortified the windows. Fast forward a full year, and the landscape of our lives had transformed in ways that still catch me off guard when I pause to reflect on it. What began as a desperate scramble had evolved into something resembling stability, a quiet rhythm that hummed with unexpected grace. Ashley, to her credit, had seized the reins with a tenacity I hadn't anticipated, shedding the inertia of her old habits like a snake molting its skin. She'd landed that part-time gig at the local daycare center, the irony of which wasn't lost on either of us, surrounded by the joyful chaos of toddlers all day, a daily reminder of the new world she was stepping into. It wasn't glamorous, clocking in for shifts that started before dawn and ended with her feet aching. But she showed up, day after day, with a smile that grew more authentic by the month. Alongside that, she dove headfirst into parenting classes, her notebook filled with scribbled insights on everything from swaddling techniques to navigating the emotional roller coaster of single motherhood. It was a commitment that spoke volumes, a silent apology woven into her actions rather than words. And then there was Lucas, her son, my nephew, arriving into the world with a lusty cry that echoed through the delivery room like a promise of brighter days. He was healthy from the start, all chubby cheeks and curious blue eyes that seemed to hold the family as collective redemption in their depths. From the moment the nurses placed him in her arms, he became the undeniable heartbeat of us all, drawing us into his orbit with an effortless magic that softened even the hardest edges. Of course, I didn't vanish into the woodwork. I chipped in where it counted. Quiet transfers for unexpected medical copays, a modest fund for diapers and daycare tuition when her paycheck stretched thin. But here's the beautiful shift. It wasn't a one-man show anymore. Ashley poured her soul into providing for him, juggling her job with late-night feedings and early morning resolve, her bank account a testament to her grit rather than my generosity alone. The relief was palpable, a weight lifting from my shoulders that allowed me to breathe easier, to invest in my own life without the constant undercurrent of obligation. No longer was I the lone pillar holding up the sagging roof. We were sharing the load, imperfectly but earnestly. Then came the twist I least expected, the one that felt like a plot turn from some feel-good novel I wouldn't have believed if I'd read it beforehand. Fred, of all people, re-emerged from the periphery, not as a romantic footnote but as a steady presence determined to claim his place in Lucas's story. He'd reached out to Ashley, one tentative evening, his voice laced with regret and resolve over the phone, confessing that the distance had only clarified his priorities. He wanted in, not as a husband or savior, but as a father, committed to showing up for the little boy who'd entered the world because of them. Ashley's skepticism was thick at first, a fortress built from the sting of his earlier exit, her questions sharp and probing. Could she trust this? Was it pity or genuine intent? But Fred didn't back down. He proved it in the small, consistent ways that matter most. Weekends turned into rituals, park outings where he'd push the stroller with a gentleness that surprised us all, bedtime stories read in a voice still rough around the edges from nerves, even splitting the cost of a pint-sized baseball glove for Lucas's first wobbly throws. Co-parenting wasn't seamless. There were awkward handoffs and the occasional flare of old tensions, but they navigated it with a focus laser-sharp on the child at the center. They never reignited the romance, and honestly, that seemed wiser. A clean slate unmarred by past pressures. Watching Fred step up earned him my quiet respect, a nod across the divide that said we'd both grown, albeit through very different fires. It all crystallized one golden summer afternoon at my backyard barbecue, the kind of gathering that starts with good intentions and unfolds into something warmer than planned. Smoke from the grill curled lazily into the air, carrying the scent of charred burgers and sweet corn, while laughter bubbled up like champagne from unseen springs. My parents, ever the doting duo, hovered around Lucas with the unabashed adoration only grandparents can muster. My dad hoisting him high for airplane rides that elicited squeals of delight, my mom cooing over his tiny sneakers as if they were museum artifacts. Nearby, Fred and Ashley moved in tandem, a makeshift team passing sippy cups and chasing errant toys across the grass, their banter light and laced with the easy camaraderie of shared purpose. I stood at the grill, flipping patties with a spatula that felt lighter in my hand than it had in years, taking in the scene like a director surveying his set. It hit me then, in that sun-dappled moment, just how profoundly the wheel had turned. The family that had once orbited my sacrifices, like planets around a weary sun, now spun on its own axis, each of us contributing to the gravity that held it together. No more lopsided leans, no more silent resentments simmering beneath the surface. It felt equitable, alive with mutual effort. As the afternoon waned and the shadows lengthened, Ashley drifted over to where I was stacking plates. Her expression soft with a gratitude that needed no fanfare. She touched my arm lightly, her voice a murmur amid the fading chatter. Tom, I don't know how to say this right, but thank you. For seeing me through the darkest stretch, for believing when I barely did. You didn't have to, but you did. I set the plates down, meeting her gaze with a small smile that carried the weight of our shared history. Hey, you did the heavy lifting, Ash. The real work, the kind that reshapes who you are, that was all you. Growing up isn't about the breaks life hands you, it's about grabbing the pieces and building something solid. You nailed it. She squeezed my hand, a silent pact renewed, before slipping back to scoop up Lucas, who babbled happily in her arms. In the quiet that followed, as the last embers glowed in the grill and the stars began their nightly vigil, I let the truth settle deep. Lucas had woven us back together, thread by fragile thread, in ways no forced apology or grand gesture ever could. He was the unassuming architect of our mending, his innocent gurgles a balm on old scars. Sure, the family remained a patchwork, flawed seams and all, with echoes of past hurts that might never fully fade. But it was stronger for the wear, infused with a resilience born of trial and tentative forgiveness. And in that imperfect harmony, I found a peace that was real, enduring, and more than sufficient to carry us forward.